how much do I need to afford a $10,000 per month early retirement? Now, one of you watching the other day came to me and asked me that exact question. So what I'm gonna do today is reveal a strategy we use at my firm to help our clients figure out how much they can afford to spend each month. And what I think you'll be surprised to learn is that the amount you need in a portfolio to retire early is actually less than you think. And the reason why this is the case and why you might need less than you think is because the traditional rules of retirement planning are outdated and the old rules no longer apply. The way that traditional planning has evolved so far has led people to believe that you need to go get a job, work hard through endless hours, and then you retire in your late 60s or 70s and you live out your days in the golden years. But you need to still answer the question, why wait until your health and life energy start to wither away? So the problem with traditional planning is it only focuses on saving up a big pot full of money that you will most likely not be able to spend over your lifetime. Now, obviously saving for the future is important, don't get me wrong, but I don't want you to wait for retirement to start living your life because tomorrow is not guaranteed. So now that you understand that traditional planning, it really just doesn't apply, let's see how in real dollars, how someone can try to figure out this $10,000 per month number and why they might feel like they don't have enough. So let's say Jack and Jill, they came to me and they said, hey, we need about $10,000 per month to both retire at age 55. And naturally, based off of traditional planning, they would ask, how much do I need in a portfolio to cover that? Well, traditional planning will say, okay, you need about $10,000 a month, so $120,000 per year. If you divide that by a simple 4% rule, that would lead you to thinking you need about $3 million saved. Now, unfortunately, this is where a lot of people stop and say, well, I don't have $3 million. I know Social Security won't start for another 8 to 12 years for me. I guess I need to work longer and continue to save more. But the truth is that we need to get a little bit deeper here and go beyond just the portfolio as far as using something like the 4% rule, because that is just incomplete. But if we get a little bit deeper and we find out that Jill has a pension of around $3,000 per month, and she could start that at age 55, what that tells me is that we now have a shortfall of $7,000 that we need to make up for somewhere else. This is why we need to factor in those other sources of income. We also know that Jack will have Social Security, which he can take in the future at around $4,000 per month. So in those initial years before Social Security, and we have a $7,000 per month shortfall, and if you're watching this and you can decide basically, okay, well, maybe I'm the ballpark or maybe I'm not. Because if we do some back of the napkin math here, $84,000 per year divided by 4%, again, which is not optimal, but something we can use for illustration, that would mean you actually only need about $2.1 million to generate that sort of income. Now, you may have that, you may have more than that, or you may have less than that, but you can start to see we're having some additional income streams that can make up this shortfall and make it even smaller, changes the math. For example, say Jill decided to have a little bit of a part-time job that maybe just didn't pay as much compared to her current job, but we can assume that Jill can make around $2,000 per month after tax. Again, that continues to drop the portfolio need to more like $1.5 million because that shortfall is now only $5,000 per month. So you can now understand that in order to afford a $10,000 monthly spend, it doesn't just come down to a $1 million or $2 million or $3 million portfolio. You can start to see that a portfolio is actually just a tool to supplement what you need to spend. And again, I went through that to give you a high level picture, but you need to remember that there is still a lot missing when you use those type of assumptions. Now, this is a good starting point, don't get me wrong, but you might need less than you think if you factor in those other sources. But that raises another really important question. When the rubber actually meets the road and we need to get beyond the hypothetical, how do we create a dynamic withdrawal strategy that also considers other income sources, taxes, longevity, and investing better? Because factoring all that into your plan will help you strike the right balance between spending on the present and only on what you value, and also smartly saving and investing for the future. And that is exactly why we focus so much on withdrawal strategy planning at my firm, because having the right strategy is one of those variables where we can help you get more out of your time and out of your money. So to explain how to solve for this issue, I'm gonna go through a case study to help you understand how we help people answer the question of how can they sustainably afford a $10,000 per month retirement spend. And you'll soon see that by having the right strategy in place, we can paint a more accurate picture than a static, simple 4% withdrawal rate. And this strategy actually has the potential to help them spend more and save them over $754,000 on their lifetime tax bill. But more on that later. Okay, so let's take a look at a case study and go back to our friends Jack and Jill. We did a sample whiteboard earlier, and we showed that they don't really need a $3 million portfolio to retire early. So let's now see how adding in a few other tweaks and other realistic factors other than the portfolio will affect their ability to spend and afford $10,000 per month if they retired early. So again, they're both age 55. Let's assume the same balance sheet we talked about earlier. So they have about $2.1 million saved total. Of that, they have around $1.6 million in tax deferred accounts and about $500,000 in taxable. And to understand how this all works together, let's take a 10,000 foot view and look at some of their retirement income over their lifetime. And when I share this on my screen, I think what you'll start to see is why we want to factor in these other sources of income and not just look at the portfolio. If you look closely here in 2024, the day they retire, as far as retirement income goes, they can actually start to spend more than $10,000 and slightly more than the original number that we whiteboarded out earlier. In fact, they can spend up to $1,000 more per month. You can see that Jill has her pension of around $3,000 per month here. And based on a few other tweaks and factors that we add in, they can spend about $8,840 from the portfolio. Now that's an initial withdrawal rate of about 4.6%. And you might be asking yourself, why is that acceptable? Well, there are a few reasons. Number one, she has a pension that could start and has that 2% cost of living adjustment, which is the blue thing you're seeing on my screen. Number two, we can follow a dynamic withdrawal strategy. So more on that in just a second here. But thirdly, we can invest better. We want to have a portfolio with multiple return streams and an allocation that's built and ready to generate income for this 40-year retirement period they have. And lastly, we want to factor in longevity. For them, we are factoring a plan length of over 41 years. You can do more or less, of course, depending on if you think you're on borrowed time, but this is 11 more years than the 4% research suggests, which is only 30 years. Now, some of you might be scratching your head and thinking, well, if you're taking more than 4% and also you're retiring much earlier, wouldn't taking more than 4% be a bad idea? And the key thing is that because we aren't ignoring cash flows, we're willing to be dynamic, which means adjusting income. And we can see that Jack starts Social Security in 2036. We're going to start replacing some of the portfolio income with Social Security income. So the result of this strategy is using more of your investment assets a little bit early on retirement when you have more energy and time, and then locking in a higher benefit from Social Security later in life as a form of longevity insurance. So they still will have the same spending amount, but now a lot less pressure on the portfolio, and you're less subject to market risk in your retirement. Now we can talk about this, and I hope you understand that being willing to make small tweaks and adjustments to their retirement income, if they need to, allows them to spend more than $10,000. Now I do some sailings with friends out in the San Diego Bay here around California, but what I know is that if I'm heading straight for the Coronado Bridge and one of my buddies tells me, hey, there's a 90% chance that you don't run into the bridge if you just continue on this path, that might make me feel pretty decent, like, okay, at least 90% chance, and that's an A in school, but in a roundabout way, you're saying that there's a 10% chance that I might hit this bridge. I think we can relate this to, depending on those traditional rules of retirement, like the 4% rule. You might have a chance of success, but also a chance of failure if you just follow this path and don't deviate. Now, in my opinion, if I want to retire early, I don't want failure to be an option. This is why making these small adjustments as you're starting to head off course can make a huge difference rather than just hoping you end up in the 90% category. Now, you can see here on the screen, this is Jack and Jill's portfolio, which currently sits around $2.1 million, where if it were to drop by 31%, I'd give them a call and say, hey, look, it looks like we hit a guardrail. We need to make a small adjustment of around $500 per month, which is about only a 5% reduction in monthly spending. But the same can be true with the upside. If the portfolio is doing well, and for them, we can see if it hits $2.2 million, they can have a little bit of an increase, right? $600 per month increase in spending. Now, this, in my opinion, is how you strike the right balance between taking advantage of spending more money when you should be able to, and also not sticking your head in the sand and running out of money. Now, they might also ask the question that some of you were thinking about is, hey, okay, maybe I'm willing to make adjustments, but how frequent are these adjustments going to be? What are the chances I have to lower my monthly income? Now, I don't have a crystal ball, but what I do have is a good piece of technology. So if we do run some simulations here and run thousands of different scenarios through different markets based on how they're invested and how much they're taking out in income right now, we can see that the odds of them having an upward or downward adjustments are a little bit more in favor of increasing rather than decreasing spending because their plan is more on the conservative side. We can see that throughout the course of their plan, we can expect on average adjustment of their income of every 2 years of about 5%. So more often than not, they are able to spend more money based on their plan. Whereas on the flip side, we can see that there's a potential of a 6% decrease, which on average is every 19 years. So there's of course a chance of them having to tighten the belt, once or twice throughout their retirement, which in my opinion is more optimal than doing nothing and potentially running out of money. But this sort of thing can give you the confidence and set expectations for what adjustments in income we can expect if we retire early. But let's go through one last important thing, and that will be taxes, because taxes for them, and most of you watching, are likely going to be your largest lifetime expense. And if we take a look at their tax projection at their current rate and start to focus on how could be a little bit more strategic in lowering their lifetime tax bill, what this projection is telling me is that there might be a pretty good opportunity here. And this is because for them, we can see that taxes are projected to be very low in their early years, which is each one of these bar represents the tax they're going to pay, whether it be federal, state, or other type of taxes. But the thing is that they start to ramp up here, and that's because of two main reasons. Number one is going to be if we're following traditional approaches like taking income from taxable, then tax deferred, and then finally tax free, we end up in a situation where little tax is generated early on, which you might want to give yourself a pat on the back. You might feel really good on having low tax at the beginning of retirement, but over 75% in their case are in tax deferred accounts. And the IRS is not so patiently waiting to take anywhere from 30 to 40% of that account in taxes because of those forced distributions later in life, which you can see start to ramp up here later on. And secondly, because they are retiring early, they're going to have a period of time before Social Security kicks in, a time where actually little income is very taxable because of that favorable taxable treatment of long-term capital gains. So they can be very strategic in how they recognize income, which you'll see here in a second. So what you're now looking at my screen is a sort of a summary and an analysis we run for clients when we're doing Roth conversions over the long term. And what is happening is we're running analysis based on their balance sheet, their life expectancies, using approximately a 7% annualized rate of return, just based on their portfolio allocation. And what we try to do here is optimize their withdrawal strategy and say, hey, based on all these factors, what would be the withdrawal plan that would give them the lowest possible lifetime tax bill? So in their case, after running about 13 different withdrawal strategy comparisons, if we purposely recognize a little bit of income each year and fill up the 22% tax bracket with Roth conversions during those years before first IRA distributions, as opposed to going the taxable, tax deferred, tax free account, the taxes saved over their lifetime, if we compare the two strategies, is approximately $754,000 in real dollars over their lifetime. And also we see here that their average tax rate drops by around 7.2%. So if you look at a similar picture that we looked at earlier and we compare the two as far as total tax goes, we see that the blue bar is taxes paid with Roth conversions, and the yellow is just if we went with that rule of thumb route. You can see that those years where there would be basically no income tax, 2024 through 2033 or so, we're sort of smoothing out the ride and purposely recognizing a little bit more income each year up to that 22% bracket, and the result is hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes saved throughout their lifetimes. And when it comes to these projections, it is a good mix of art and science because none of us know how long you're going to be in retirement, which is just a very polite way of me saying, I don't know how long you're going to be alive. And secondly, I don't know what future tax rates are. If the government does in fact decide to raise tax rates in the future, this picture could look even better, especially if you do Roth conversions. This is a very personal choice and one that you want to know the trade-offs. But in order to make sure this makes sense for you, you need to understand the benefit of doing this will exceed some of the trade-offs. So I made a video going through when it does not make sense for you to do Roth conversions. You can watch that by clicking right here. Once again, this is Matt with 1 Degree Advisors. If you found any value in this video, I appreciate you if you hit that subscribe button. It's absolutely free. That way you can hear from me every single week to help you retire early with confidence.